It started with fire. Literal fire. My name is Rachel. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Has anyone ever tried to punish you for simply saying no? Have you ever been made to feel like everything you worked for belonged to everyone else but you? If you have, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're watching from, and drop your experience in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me tell you what happened to me. That evening I came home from work feeling drained. I'd been covering for a coworker out sick, staying late all week, and my back was killing me from sitting at the desk. I opened the door expecting peace. Instead, the smell hit me first. Burnt fabric. Melted polyester. And smoke, not the kind that alarms you immediately. No, the kind that quietly tells you, something you love is gone. I stepped inside slowly, holding my breath. My heart sank when I saw the living room. It looked like someone had hosted a bonfire. Indoors. And in the middle of the mess was a pile of ashes, half-melted zippers, buttons, and what used to be hangers. I recognized the pattern of my navy blue silk dress on top. Or what was left of it. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was just another Tuesday. My sister. Wearing one of my old sweaters. The one I thought I'd misplaced last winter. She didn't look up. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely louder than a whisper. She didn't even flinch. Just shrugged and said, "You said no. So I made space. You act like your closet is a museum." My legs went weak, but I didn't show it. I walked over to the pile slowly, knelt and touched the edge of a scorched sleeve. It was my graduation dress. The one I wore when I walked across the stage with tears in my eyes because no one from our family had shown up. Not even her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But I didn't. I just stood there and stared at the damage. Years of memories, outfits I'd saved for, moments I'd built, gone in minutes. "Why would you do this?" I asked. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold. "Because you had a choice. Help your sister or hoard your money like you always do. You chose money. Now you have none of what it bought." And just like that she went back to scrolling. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either. I sat on the floor of my room and stared at the space where my wardrobe used to hang. My hands were still shaking, not from sadness but something colder. Something harder. He thought she was punishing me. He had no idea. I was the one signing her boyfriend's paychecks. She had no idea that every paycheck her boyfriend received passed through my hands first. The next morning I got up early like nothing had happened. No tears. No yelling match. I made coffee, tied my hair back and got dressed in whatever survived the fire. Mostly old jeans and a company sweatshirt from 3 years ago. She passed by me in the hallway, smirking like she'd won something. I didn't speak. But in my head I had already started rearranging the pieces. See, I work in human resources. Specifically payroll and compliance at a mid-sized tech firm. Not glamorous, but I know where the money goes. I know who does their work and who fakes it. And Travis, her boyfriend, was a contractor in our marketing division. Got in last year after some creative networking at one of our events. I knew his name long before my sister even introduced him to the family. The irony? She used to brag about how successful he was. How he made great money. And I let her believe it because I wasn't petty. I figured let them be happy. But now, after everything, I felt no need to protect illusions. After I got to work, I opened his profile in the system. Travis Calloway. Contractor. $6,800 per month. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I pulled his last 3 months of time logs. What I found? Almost laughable. Late submissions. Meetings scheduled with non-existent departments. Duplicate travel claims. Even a hotel invoice billed during a weekend we had no events. It didn't take a genius to spot the lies. It just took someone who finally had a reason to look. And I had one. I took screenshots of everything. Clean, date-stamped, documented. I didn't go straight to HR leadership, not yet. First, I made a quiet visit to someone I trusted in internal compliance. I told her, "This stays between us, for now. But something's not right." She raised an eyebrow. "You think he's gaming the system?" "I think he's laughing at it." We flagged his file for a silent review. No alerts sent to Travis, nothing to raise suspicion. He'd continue getting paid while the data gathered itself. Back at home, my sister threw a fit because I didn't react to her lesson. She asked me if I'd learned to share yet. I told her calmly, I've learned that some people will only stop taking when they've ruined everything in reach. She rolled her eyes and called me dramatic. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being surgical. Because while she was busy mocking my silence, I was tracking every dollar her boyfriend didn't earn. Every fake meeting. Every false hour logged. And soon he was going to face consequences neither of them saw coming. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. But sometimes, they're the same thing. About 2 weeks later, the tension in the office was thick. People didn't know why compliance had quietly requested time logs from specific departments, but whispers were growing. Kept my head down. I did my job like always, stayed late, kept it professional. Meanwhile, my sister kept bragging at home that Travis was about to be promoted, and that they were planning a trip to Puerto Rico on his bonus. I smiled when she said that. She thought she was ahead of the world. But I knew the world was catching up to her. On Thursday morning, Travis walked into the office wearing his usual fake confidence. Perfect hair, shiny shoes, loud laugh. I watched from the corner of my eye as he strolled in and greeted the receptionist like he owned the building. 2 hours later, he got called into a meeting with our director and 2 members of compliance. It was supposed to be just a routine review. But Travis came out of that room looking like he'd seen a ghost. His face was pale, lips tight. He didn't even go back to his desk, just walked straight outside like he needed air. I pretended not to notice. Just kept typing. Later that day I got the internal memo. Travis Calloway, contract terminated effective immediately. Pending audit results shared with legal. No explanation attached. Just that one cold sentence. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. I didn't feel joy, just relief. Not because I had gotten back at anyone, but because a weight had shifted. A balance had returned. When I got home that night, my sister was curled up on the couch looking irritated. He got fired, she said bitterly. Some nonsense about discrepancies. Can you believe that? I took off my coat slowly, setting it on the hook. He said someone must have set him up. Like, who even tracks that kind of stuff? I looked right at her. Calm, steady. Someone who's tired of being treated like an ATM, I said. She blinked. What? You said I never give. But I did. Every month. Indirectly. I was the one authorizing his payments. I watched him steal, fake, and lie. And still I stayed quiet. Until you lit my past on fire. She stood up fast. You're joking. No, I replied. You burn my memories. So I burned the mask he was hiding behind. She didn't scream like I expected. She just stood there stunned. It was like she'd been slapped with silence. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. I walked past her into my room, the same one she'd emptied of clothes and dignity, and sat down. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to win. Because the truth had finally spoken. And I knew she heard it. The next few days at home were colder than anything I've ever felt, and I'm not talking about the weather. My sister barely looked at me. When she did, it was all glare and no soul. She walked around like the world owed her an apology. Like I owed her something for taking away the illusion of her perfect boyfriend. But I wasn't concerned about her mood. I was watching something else unravel, quietly. See, when someone like Travis loses his contract under investigation, it doesn't end there. Legal gets involved. Finance reviews every claim. HR digs deep. It's not just a slap on the wrist. It's a message. We don't reward liars. I knew more was coming. I just didn't know how fast. One morning, my compliance contact sent me a short note. Thank you. Your documentation helped uncover more than we expected. We're flagging 3 other contractors connected to his reports. That was the moment I realized. Travis wasn't just lazy. He was part of a small circle exploiting the system. Fake reimbursements, forged meeting logs, referral bonuses between friends. I wasn't just removing dead weight. I had unknowingly triggered a clean sweep. At home, my sister was applying for reality shows online and uploading cringe vlogs about being betrayed by corporate injustice. One of her videos actually said, they targeted Travis because he was too ambitious. I didn't respond. I just turned off the Wi-Fi that night and watched her spiral into a tantrum. Meanwhile, I was getting emails from upper leadership. Quite thank yous. One even said, employees like you protect the heart of this company. I kept those emails. Not for pride. For peace. At work, things got sharper. The leadership team asked me to present a short internal workshop about compliance and payroll red flags. Not as punishment, but because they respected how I handled things. It was surreal. Just weeks ago I'd been sitting on my bedroom floor, staring at a pile of burned memories. Now I was speaking to executives about ethics and policy, and they listened. After the session, one VP stopped me in the hallway. "You really handled that situation with class," he said. "We don't often see people stay that calm under pressure." I smiled. "When fire comes for your past," I said, "sometimes silence is the only extinguisher that works." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Because the fire didn't just burn my clothes. It burned the idea that silence meant weakness. That being kind meant being used. That letting people step over your boundaries was being a good sister. No more. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I just stopped offering warmth to people who only wanted to stand near me when it was convenient. And without even saying it out loud. I had drawn my line. At home I noticed the shift in her eyes first. My sister wasn't angry anymore, she was scared. Not of me but of the world suddenly closing in on her. Travis stopped calling. She tried texting him 20 times in one night. I saw the glow of her screen as I passed her room at midnight. Then I heard the muffled sobs. The realization had begun to settle in. The man she defended, the man she fought her own blood for, had vanished the moment the money dried up. I didn't say anything. I just sat in my room sipping tea, scrolling through rental listings. It was time to go. Not because I was running, but because I was done standing still. The next morning I left a printed letter on the kitchen table. It wasn't dramatic. Just a clear move-out date, a list of bills I'd already paid and one line at the bottom. Some bridges burn quietly. This one was loud and necessary. I booked a studio apartment near work. Nothing fancy. But peaceful. White walls, working heater, windows that faced the sunrise. I had just a suitcase and a folded blanket when I moved in, but I felt lighter than I had in years. A week after I left, I got a text from her. "You abandoned me. Just like everyone else." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I typed back. "No. You set fire to the last place I felt safe. I just chose not to sit in the smoke." She didn't reply. Instead, I started getting messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old classmates. Coworkers I barely knew. They'd seen a small company bulletin about my promotion. A quiet upgrade to senior HR advisor. "You deserve it," one wrote. "You were always the calm one," another said. I remember that from college. It meant more than I expected. Not because of the title, but because people saw me for something other than the dependable one. They saw the line I drew. The stand I took. The silence I turned into strength. One of my coworkers, a junior analyst, stopped me by the elevator a few days later. She looked nervous, holding her coffee with both hands. I just wanted to say, "I heard what happened with the contractor. And, thank you. Not everyone has the backbone to speak up." I smiled. It wasn't about speaking up. It was about finally listening to myself. That weekend I went shopping for the first time since the fire. I didn't replace every dress. I bought 3 things. A soft blue cardigan, a pair of boots that fit perfectly, and a long gray coat that made me feel like I was walking into a new chapter. As I was. Not as a victim. Not as a villain. But as someone who remembered who she was, and decided never to forget again. It was a rainy Wednesday when everything really collapsed. I got a call at work. Not from my sister, from our mother. We hadn't spoken in months. Her voice was pinched, defensive, almost rehearsed. "I don't want to take sides," she started, which already told me everything I needed to know. "But your sister is struggling. Travis is gone. She's behind on rent. She says you ruined his life." I closed my office door. "Mom," I said calmly, "did she mention that she set my clothes on fire? That she humiliated me in our own home? That she watched me rebuild myself from nothing and still played the victim?" Silence. "She said you were overreacting." Overreacting. That word stuck in my chest like glass. For years they had called me the steady one. The smart one. The mature one. But what they really meant was, the one who won't fight back. And now that I finally had, suddenly I was the problem. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told her what I had needed to say for years. I was not put on this earth to be your backup plan. I am not the cleanup crew for other people's messes. I gave until there was nothing left to give. And when I said no, she lit a match. Mom sighed, and for a moment I thought she might soften. But all she said was, "You've changed." I smiled to myself. Good. I hung up. That night my sister showed up at my building. Security called me from downstairs. She didn't know I'd moved into a secure entry building, one where you couldn't just barge in with an attitude and a guilt trip. She stood outside for 20 minutes holding her phone, pacing like she expected me to come down and hug her through the mess. I watched from the window. And I didn't move. The next day I got another text. Shorter this time. They're asking questions about Travis's invoices. You didn't tell them everything, did you? I didn't reply. She was finally realizing it. The fire she started had revealed more than she thought. She assumed revenge would come in the form of screaming, slamming doors, or public drama. But I had chosen the quieter kind. The kind that starts with a click, a log, a form, and ends with your safety net gone. They both thought I was soft. But what they didn't understand is that silence is sharp. Silence listens. Silence records. And when it speaks, ends things. A few weeks later I was standing in front of my closet, my new closet, running my fingers across the simple, beautiful clothes I'd chosen myself. There was no designer label wore here, no showmanship, no borrowed identity. Just pieces that fit my life now. Calmer. Clearer. I took a deep breath and smiled. That Saturday I hosted my first dinner in the new place. Just 3 people, close coworkers who had supported me during the Travis situation. We laughed over homemade pasta, drank wine, and shared stories about the strangest things we'd seen at work. And for the first time in a long while I didn't feel like I was hiding behind strength. I was just living. The next morning I checked my email and found one from our company CEO. Subject: thank you. Rachel, I wanted to personally thank you for how you handled the contractor issue. Your integrity and attention to detail helped prevent further losses and set an example for how leadership should act. I've spoken with HR about you leading future ethics training. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet this week. I sat with that email for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I felt something inside me settle. For once, doing the right thing hadn't come at the cost of my peace. It had built it. Later that week, while walking through the office, I passed a young woman in the break room. Someone new, an intern maybe. She looked nervous, fumbling with her mug, and I smiled at her. "You're doing okay?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "Yes, just trying to learn everything. It's a lot." "I know," I said. "But you'll be fine. Just ask questions. And don't be afraid to say no when something feels wrong." She blinked. "That's what someone said to me when I was being pressured in my last job." I left. I nodded. "Good. That means you're already ahead." And I meant it. Because if there's one thing the past few months had taught me, it's that saying no is not selfish. It's survival. And sometimes, it's the greatest kindness you can show yourself. Back at home, I lit a candle and played some old music. I pulled out a journal and began writing down everything I'd never said, not to Travis, not to my sister, not even to myself. I wrote about the dresses, the silence, the emails, the way people show their true faces when they think you're powerless. And I ended it with one line. I didn't lose anything. I just cleared space for better things to grow. It felt like the final stitch in a wound that had finally closed. The sun was setting behind my window blinds when I realized something. I hadn't thought about the fire in over a week. Not the smoke, not the ashes, not even the blue silk dress I once cherished. And it wasn't because I'd forgotten. It was because I'd finally healed. A few days later, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was my sister's. It wasn't an apology. It was a list of everything going wrong in her life. Bills overdue. Travis ghosting her. A landlord threatening eviction. A cousin who no longer returns her calls. And one short line near the end. "I didn't think you'd ever turn your back on me." I sat with that letter for a long time. I thought of all the times I'd given her grace, paid off debts, listened to her rants, protected her from consequences she didn't even know were circling. I thought of the dresses she burned, not out of desperation but entitlement. As if my hard work was something she could punish. And then I thought about the quiet, steady strength I'd rebuilt since. I didn't reply. Instead, I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote 3 words on the front. "This is closure." I dropped it in the mailbox without hesitation. That night I went out to dinner by myself. Sat near the window of a small Italian cafe and watched the people go by. A couple in their 60s laughed over wine. A woman walked her dog past, humming a song I hadn't heard in years. And across the street, a young girl danced in the rain while her father tried to get her to hurry under an umbrella. It was quiet. Simple. And I finally felt like I belonged to my own life again. To those of you watching, maybe you've been there. Maybe your peace came at a cost. Maybe someone tried to take everything you had simply because you said no. If that's you, I want to tell you something. You don't owe anyone your destruction. You don't have to stay just because they call it love. You don't have to give just because they call it family. And you are not heartless for choosing peace over chaos. Comment below if this touched something in you. Tell me your story. Where you're from. What you walked away from. I promise you, there's power in naming it. As for me, I've learned that some people will only love you when they're allowed to use you. And the moment you stop being useful, they light the match. Let them. Because fire doesn't just destroy. Sometimes, it clears the ground for something better to grow.